In the last couple of videos, we've been looking at the cost of public DC rapid charging and why prices look the way they do in the UK. Today I want to use the information we've learned to consider the future of charging. Can we see any patterns emerging that will impact the market as it currently stands? Are we stuck with the high prices we are currently paying, or is the hope for them falling back to more reasonable levels? Hello everyone, I'm Andrew, and today I'm going to dust off my crystal ball and try to predict how the DC rapid charging landscape will evolve in the coming years. I want to use what we learned about current costs to see how they might change in the future. As last time, this video builds on what we learned in the last couple of uploads to the channel. I'll link to those from the end screen of this one in case you haven't already seen those. But let's start by summarising the breakdowns we ended up with in those videos. Here we can see a comparison of Osprey's costs alongside Tesla's, so that we can see in what way they are different. Here I'm using pricing for public use of the Tesla superchargers, as they stand at that Leicester site we discussed last time out. Tesla's breakdown is somewhat more open to debate, of course, as we have significantly less information to go on. See the comments associated with the last video for the concerns that people raised, and my feedback on those concerns. One bit of housekeeping before we continue. You might not recognise the figures shown on the left of this table, and that's because I've had to correct them a little bit. It had escaped my attention, but Osprey raised their prices by 3.8% in April 2025, just after I'd started work on this video, so they now charge 82 pence per kilowatt hour. Therefore, I've adjusted the breakdown to show that price and how that is split. I've also put figures to their admin costs and their losses, shown separately in this single graphic. We'll need to keep an eye on those losses as we progress, and I'll move it into the top table from now on. What we see from the totals, however, is just how uncompetitive Osprey currently are in comparison to Tesla. The price difference is enormous, and that doesn't bode well for Osprey, does it? At the moment, this isn't the end of the world. There's enough hatred for Tesla, and Elon in particular, to keep Osprey going for a good while yet. However, as more and more players join the market, Osprey's position looks weak. Is there anything they can do? Well, yes, a few things probably, but the most obvious one is improve utilisation. We saw last time out that fixed costs are amortised across the number of kilowatt hours sold, and Tesla, having higher utilisation, are in a better position in that regards. If Osprey could increase their utilisation to 16.7%, what Tesla are achieving globally, as shown in the right column here, then the losses stop. The profit even increases a bit, which would help them a lot. The slight problem with improving their utilisation is that it isn't entirely in their own control. It also depends on what every other charge point operator is doing. In the last couple of years, there has been a huge rush to expand the DC rapid charging networks across all of the operators. They each want to remain relevant and have to race as fast as everyone else to get their installations done. But the good news is that we are starting to see the dash slow. It's not all that visible yet in the installation data. However, the charge point operators were disheartened by the government's slight relaxing of the ZEV mandate. The changes were pretty small, just the retention of some flexibilities that were due to end, but operators saw it as a bit of a concern, I gather, and so they started to feel a bit less certain about exactly how fast EV adoption would progress. The impact won't be dramatic, I don't think, but in the face of uncertainty, they will draw back a bit. Installations will slow now. And it makes sense. After all, we would probably do the same at a household level. If we are less confident of future income, the first thing we're likely to do is reduce our expenditure. Meanwhile, in EV land, the number of cars on the road is going to increase again a lot this year. Probably another 450,000 cars added to an existing fleet of 1.3 million, an increase in the fleet size of about 34%. More EVs on the road, with that number starting to increase faster than the rate of installation of DC rapid chargers, means more people needing to use the DC rapid charging that's in place, naturally driving up utilisation for all of the networks. If they were able to increase further still, to say 25% utilisation, then they would be in an even better position, not only in healthy net profit, but with room to reduce their prices. Even so, they still aren't able to compete with Tesla on price alone. Not if Tesla's utilisation remains the same, and certainly not if Tesla's utilisation also increases to the same level. Note that I'm showing a similar percentage profit for both companies here, but because Osprey's costs are higher, so is the amount of profit shown in pence. Remember too that Osprey have entered into profit-sharing agreements with their landlords, so in most instances they won't keep all of the amount shown. The main problem Osprey are facing is the difference in build costs. Not only do we think other operators are spending more on their installations than Tesla, but they are having to pay off those costs with interest and to an investor's deadline. Eventually, everyone will largely pay off these upfront build costs, so the problem will eventually be different, but even then, they still can't quite match Tesla. The problem is starting to look systemic, isn't it? Setting up a company solely to offer DC rapid charging probably isn't a viable model in the long run, not in comparison to those companies with multiple business units. There seem to be two potential outcomes then. One is a bunch of mergers and acquisitions. You would think there will be at least some consolidation. But the other option is to diversify. Let's think about a similar but more established market, petrol forecourts. What do they look like? Are they all standalone businesses? Here's one down in Reading. What's interesting here is that we don't just have a single source of income. There are additional opportunities for revenue here. Pop into the shop, where a bottle of Diet Coke is £3.85, a sandwich is just under £5, and you start to realise why petrol forecourts can survive with a small profit from fuel sales, which is how they've operated for years. It seems to me that this is from where the charge point operators need to draw inspiration. When we're charging our EVs and having a bit of a break from driving, we need somewhere to buy a snack and a drink. That is the option that seems to make most sense to me, for the CPOs to diversify into retail and maybe even leisure. Then they can reduce the amount of profit that they're making from charging a bit, as well as amortise the admin costs a bit more widely, and our charging really starts to get competitive. GridServe already do this in a couple of places, specifically at their electric forecourts, although there are only a few of those at the moment. They have also partnered with Dobbies, who run a chain of garden centres, although you have to wonder which way the money flows in that relationship. Let's hope they aren't profit sharing on just the charging. There are plenty of other companies with the same advantages too, especially the supermarkets. We've seen with fuel that supermarkets use price to draw in custom and then profit from sales in the store. I can imagine there being a bit of a price war between supermarkets once they have established their networks and are vying for our business. So there you go, that's my thesis for where we're going. Prices should fall as utilisation goes up, which we should see happen in the next year or perhaps two. But the networks that will win through are those that diversify, where charging is one part of a larger business, as that helps support the ancillary costs. There will probably be some mergers and acquisitions along the way too, some losers that don't make it, sadly. But the winners will be diversified, as otherwise they can't compete, at least not on price. Just one more thing before I leave you. You remember that petrol forecourt in Reading? Well, guess what they have round the back of the shop? Well, will you look at that? 4 DC rapid charging spots. How very interesting. The price? Oh, well, I'm glad you asked. In that first video about the price of rapid charging, I said that I didn't think we were being ripped off, but maybe I was thinking too narrowly, focusing on those new companies set up solely for charging. In contrast, the oil companies, BP and in this case Shell, would have to work very hard to justify their prices to me. They benefit from a lot of the same economies as Tesla. For them, charging is a very small part of the business, helping to keep admin costs lower. While they don't make their own chargers, I'm sure they could, so they should be able to be competitive. Yet here is Shell charging 89 pence per kilowatt hour for contactless payments. 89 pence, that's insane. If you want to feel ripped off, you want to be incensed by the cost of charging, I suggest you start there. Right, I'll put my crystal ball away again, but in the meantime, let me know what you reckon to my predictions. Do you agree that diversification is the key to surviving in the charging market? Can you see companies who only offer charging being winners? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what your predictions are and when you think prices will drop. If you've liked this week's video, then it would be a huge help to me if you click the thumbs up button and consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more from me. Thanks.